My mother-in-law announced we're finally having a baby. At family dinner, after searching through my personal items in our hotel room, I thought paying our own way on our family vacation meant freedom. Instead, I walked into our hotel room to find my mother-in-law had already unpacked our belongings, created a mandatory family itinerary, and worse, she'd gone through my phone. At dinner that night, she clinked her glass and announced to everyone that we were finally trying for a baby soon. My husband just sat there silently as I felt my world collapse. I hadn't even decided if I wanted children yet, let alone told anyone about my private health tracking apps. This is what happened when I finally stood up for myself. We stepped into the resort lobby holding hands, still grinning about finally paying our own way for this trip. The concierge smiled and slid 2 key cards across the marble counter. "Your in-laws arranged an upgrade," she said. I should have known then what that meant. Our upgraded room was right next to theirs, connected by an adjoining door. Their luggage cart stood empty outside our door, a bad sign. When we walked in, I saw my dresses already hanging in the closet, perfectly spaced like my mother-in-law always insists. My toiletries were lined up on the bathroom counter in her exact system. Skincare products ordered by usage frequency rather than size. A laminated itinerary sat prominently on the nightstand. 7 a.m. family breakfast, mandatory. 10 a.m. group snorkeling, no exceptions. 1 p.m. Every hour accounted for through bedtime. I turned to my husband. They went through all our things, even my underwear drawer. He shrugged and started unpacking his swim trunks like this was normal. That's when I noticed my phone charging by the bed. The screen was on, unlocked, displaying my period tracker app. My fingers went cold scrolling through it, all my data there for anyone to see. Then I checked my notifications and saw new messages in their family group chat. Photos of our unpacked suitcases with comments like, "Look how neat everything is now," and "She packs so much black clothing." I looked around at our violated space. The bed turned down exactly how his mother likes it, the towels folded in her precise triangular style. Even the balcony furniture had been rearranged to match their room's setup. This wasn't hospitality, it was a full audit of our lives. In the bathroom, I found more evidence. My razor had been moved from its case to the shower caddy. My contact solution sat beside my husband's instead of with my toiletries. Small things, but all wrong. Like someone had studied our habits and decided to improve them without asking. When I confronted my husband again, he said, "They're just trying to help." He didn't seem to care they'd handled my personal items, that they'd accessed private health information, that our first act of financial independence had been immediately undermined by their control. The worst part was realizing this must have taken hours. They'd clearly arrived early specifically to do this. While unpacking, they'd handled every item we'd brought, examined it, judged it, and decided where it belonged. I pictured them discussing my underwear choices, debating whether I packed enough sunscreen. At dinner, I'd learned they'd gone further. But in that moment, staring at my unlocked phone and their meticulous rearrangements, I understood something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't about help or gifts. It was about erasing boundaries and proving who really controlled our lives. The adjoining door between our rooms suddenly seemed less like a connecting passage and more like an open wound. I tested the lock 3 times, but knew it wouldn't matter. They'd already made it clear. Nothing about this vacation would be truly private. Not our space, not our schedule, and certainly not my body. As I stood there feeling invaded, my husband simply asked what time we were meeting everyone for dinner. Like everything about this was normal. Like I was the one being unreasonable for wanting some things to remain mine alone. That casual dismissal hurt almost as much as the violation itself. The rest would come later. The public announcement, the humiliation, the fight that nearly ended everything. But the real damage happened in that first hour. The moment I realized no matter how much we paid or how many years passed, some people would always believe they owned any part of you they could reach. And sometimes that included people who were supposed to stand beside you when lines were crossed. I didn't know it then, but that adjoining door would become the perfect metaphor for everything wrong with our relationship to his family. A physical manifestation of the thin, flimsy boundaries that had never really kept anything private or sacred. The first true realization that unless something changed, I'd never have a space in this family that was truly my own. No one tells you how lonely anger can feel. Standing in that hotel room with my violated things, realizing the person who should have been outraged with me was instead just unpacking, adjusting, accepting, making excuses for unacceptable behavior because that's what he'd been trained to do since childhood. I picked up my phone, thumb hovering over the flight change option, but something made me pause. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was knowing I deserved better than slinking away like I'd done something wrong. Whatever the reason, I took a shaky breath and decided to stay, to fight, to test whether there was any version of this family that could respect boundaries. That decision would cost me days of tears and frustration. It would strain my marriage nearly to breaking, but it would also become the moment I finally started demanding the respect I deserved. The first real crack in a dam of control that had held for decades. That innocent-looking adjoining door, the hotel key card with upgraded room number, the laminated schedule, they all became the first dominoes in a chain reaction that forced everything into the open. The silent dinners, the suppressed resentments, the unspoken expectations about my body and our future. All of it finally said aloud because someone couldn't resist snooping through a phone. I didn't sleep that first night, just stared at the adjoining door, waiting for the handle to turn, wondering what else they thought they were entitled to take, wondering if I'd have the courage to stop them, wondering if I'd be standing there alone if I did. The restaurant was all white linens and soft chatter until my mother-in-law tapped her wine glass with a manicured nail. Every conversation stopped. stopped. 12 forks froze midair as 20 faces turned toward her. "Big news," she announced, like we were about to win an award. "These two are finally trying for a baby." My father-in-law immediately added, "About time you prioritized family over that consulting job." His tone made it sound like I'd personally chosen my career just to spite them. All eyes dropped to my stomach like I might already be showing. My water glass slipped in my sweaty hand, leaving a dark ring on the tablecloth. Then came the details I wasn't prepared for. "I saw your ovulation dates on that clever app, dear," my mother-in-law continued, as casually as discussing the weather. "Perfect timing this week." My face burned. She'd not only looked through my private health data, she'd studied it, memorized it, planned around it without my knowledge or consent. I turned to my husband, expecting shock or outrage. Instead, he concentrated on cutting his steak into precise little squares, carefully avoiding my eyes. His silence felt louder than any words. Around us, relatives launched into excited advice about baby names and nursery themes, like this was a done deal rather than something stolen from my phone. When I excused myself to the bathroom, no one seemed to notice except my sister-in-law, who gave me a tight, knowing smile. The mirror showed mascara running down my cheeks in thin black lines. It looked like cracks in the foundation of something I hadn't realized was so fragile until that moment. I splashed cold water on my face, but the tightness in my chest wouldn't ease. The worst part wasn't even the violation. It was realizing how many people at that table thought this was normal, appropriate, something to celebrate rather than a massive overstep. Back at the table, my mother-in-law was now explaining to the group how she'd accidentally seen my app while straightening up our room. The way she said it made my skin crawl, like she expected praise for snooping. My father-in-law kept refilling my wine glass despite me not touching it, as if getting me tipsy might help their cause. After dinner, my husband pulled me aside near the elevators. "Mom's just excited," he said. "Don't make waves on vacation." Like I was the problem. Like I should be flattered they'd taken such an interest in my reproductive system. Up in the room, I waited until he fell asleep, then pulled the covers over my head and downloaded a hotel booking app. The glow of my phone screen felt like the only light in a very dark room. With shaky fingers, I reserved a different room in another tower, one without adjoining doors or prearranged schedules. The confirmation email came through at 1:17 a.m. I remember staring at the reservation number, wondering if this small act of defiance would make things better or worse. But when I thought about facing another breakfast, another group activity, another night listening to their muffled conversations through that thin adjoining door, I knew there was no going back. That dinner became the turning point, not just because of what they'd done, but because of what I realized about myself in that bathroom mirror. I'd been tolerating smaller invasions for years, the comments about my wardrobe, the surprise visits, the endless opinions on how I should live. But this crossed a line so bright even I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. My husband was still asleep, one arm flung across my empty pillow like he didn't even notice I'd spent the night pressed against the far edge of the bed. I dressed quietly, packed a small bag with essentials, and slipped out before the first family breakfast alarm could ring. The hotel hallway was eerily quiet at 6 a.m. My footsteps didn't echo on the thick carpet as I made my way to the elevator, half expecting someone to pop out and stop me, but no one did. The elevator doors closed silently behind me, and for the first time since we'd arrived, I took a full breath. When I reached the front desk to collect my new key, the clerk gave me a curious look but didn't comment. Maybe resort staff see this kind of thing often, people switching rooms mid-stay to escape something uncomfortable. My hand trembled slightly as I signed the paperwork, but my signature came out clear and steady. Back in the privacy of my new room, I sent a simple text to the family group chat. "Staying here, meet you at breakfast at 9. 3 typing bubbles appeared immediately, then disappeared. No messages came through, just silence. I sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed, staring at my reflection in the dark TV screen. I knew this small act would cause an explosion. I knew they'd see it as betrayal rather than self-preservation. But sitting alone in that quiet, untouched room, I felt something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Agency. The simple power of deciding where to put my own toothbrush. The next confrontation would come soon enough. At breakfast, no doubt. But for now, in these stolen moments, I let myself imagine what it might be like to spend an entire vacation without being managed, without being watched, without being treated like some kind of disappointing work in progress. When I finally stood to unpack my small bag, I took my time arranging each item exactly how I wanted it. No rush, no audience, just me and my choices, finally given space to breathe. The ocean view from my new balcony was nearly identical to the one I'd left behind, but the air here felt different, lighter, like I'd stepped out from under some heavy weight I hadn't fully acknowledged until it was gone. I leaned against the railing and watched the waves roll in, wondering how long the peace would last. Breakfast would be messy, my husband would be angry, his parents would be worse, but staring at the horizon where sea met sky, I found I didn't care as much as I thought I would. Some lines, once crossed, change everything, and I was starting to understand that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. The knock came right on schedule at 8:55 a.m. I knew without opening the door who it would be, whichever family member had drawn the short straw to fetch me. I took my time finishing my coffee before answering, savoring these last quiet moments before the storm. Here, at least, no one could walk in uninvited. When I finally turned the handle, I found my sister-in-law standing there, looking equal parts amused and impressed. "You're in so much trouble," she whispered, handing me a to-go cup of the terrible resort coffee they all loved. But God, was it worth it? As we walked to breakfast together, I realized this might be the first real test of boundaries I'd ever set with his family. The reckoning I'd been avoiding for 5 years of marriage. My stomach twisted with nerves, but beneath that, something else pulsed, something suspiciously like hope. The entire family sat stiffly around the table like I'd committed some unspeakable crime. My father-in-law cleared his throat. "We need to talk about your strange behavior this morning," he announced to the table as if reading from a script. My husband stared at his plate while relatives exchanged glances. "You're embarrassing me in front of everyone," he muttered under his breath, reaching for my hand like I was a misbehaving child needing correction. At precisely 9:30 a.m., the time I'd blocked off in our shared calendar weeks ago for a work call, my phone rang. I stood up mid-conversation. "Sorry," I said, already walking away. "I have to take this." Their shocked faces told me everything. They'd assumed I would cancel my obligations to accommodate their spontaneous family time, that I'd prioritize their unplanned lectures over the commitments I'd clearly marked. Back in my safe room, I didn't make any work calls, just sat by the window watching the pool attendants set up chairs. The sunlight reflected off the water in bright dancing patterns that kept catching my eye. I thought about how none of this would seem unreasonable to people with normal families, how moving rooms and keeping work commitments shouldn't warrant emergency family meetings. At 10:15 a.m., my husband knocked on the door. He entered without waiting for an answer, scanning the room like he expected to find evidence of some breakdown. "You need to come back to our real room," he said. "Mom's really upset." When I didn't move, he sighed and sat on the edge of the bed. "Why are you making this so difficult?" The question wasn't angry, just genuinely confused. That might have been the worst part, that my completely normal boundaries seemed like acts of aggression to them. I showed him my calendar, the scheduled work blocks they'd ignored, the personal time I'd clearly marked, pointed out how strange it was that his parents thought they could enter my private space without permission. He frowned at the screen like the evidence didn't quite compute. "You know they're just trying to help," he said finally. That's when I realized we weren't having the same conversation. To me, this was about basic respect. To him, any rejection of their overbearing help was ingratitude. The rest of the day passed in a strange standoff. I attended the afternoon snorkeling trip because I wanted to snorkel, not because it was on their laminated schedule. Sat with cousins instead of his parents at dinner. Said goodnight early and walked back to my own room alone. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The air conditioning hummed softly, undisturbed by any sounds from adjoining rooms. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother-in-law. "We're worried about you staying alone over there." I turned it face down on the nightstand. Small freedoms became my quiet resistance. I left my belongings wherever I wanted, changed my dinner order when my father-in-law tried to choose for me, set my schedule according to what I actually wanted to do. Each act felt both trivial and revolutionary. By the third morning, patterns emerged. His parents would casually drop by my new room multiple times a day. My husband would shuttle between us carrying messages. The cousins started looking at me with something like curiosity, like they'd never seen anyone push back before. When I arrived poolside with a book instead of joining their group excursion, my mother-in-law actually gasped. "But we have paddleboard reservations," she said, clutching her itinerary like it was a sacred text. I just smiled and adjusted my sunglasses. "You all have fun," I said, turning a page. That's when the real backlash started. Before I'd even finished my iced coffee, my phone buzzed with the first concerned text from home, then another, and another. The message was clear. If I wouldn't fall in line voluntarily, they'd apply pressure until I did. But something had shifted in me during those quiet mornings alone. The more they pushed, the less I budged. Their outrage only proved what I'd suspected all along. Normal people don't get angry when you set reasonable boundaries. Only controllers do. I was sitting by the pool when my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. "Sweetie, your in-laws called. They said you've been acting strangely." The screen blurred as my vision tunneled. Before I could respond, another notification popped up. My childhood best friend. "Hey, heard you're having a breakdown on vacation?" My hands shook scrolling through the messages. A voicemail from Aunt Carol. "We're all worried about your mental state." I walked back to my room on autopilot, the resort colors too bright against my simmering anger. The envelope sat halfway under my door like some twisted room service. Inside, a handwritten list titled, "How to Improve Your Marriage." 1. Stop working so much. 2. Smile more at family events. 3. Let us help with baby plans. The paper smelled faintly of my mother-in-law's floral perfume. My husband knocked 20 minutes later holding a mesh bag of fertility teas. "Mom thought these might help," he said, placing them on my dresser like a peace offering. The labels promised to balance female reproductive systems. I stared at the steaming cup he'd already prepared until the tendrils of vapor dissipated between us. Dinner that night felt like stepping onto a stage. The family watched me extra carefully, as if I might start screaming or crying at any moment. Appetizers had just arrived when my mother-in-law produced a gift-wrapped box with a giant bow. "Open it," she urged, her smile stretching too wide. The prenatal vitamins inside gleamed under the chandelier light. "To life's next chapter," my father-in-law toasted, clinking his glass against mine hard enough to slosh wine onto the tablecloth. Everyone cheered except my sister-in-law, who dropped her gaze to her lap. That's when I noticed the familiar packaging. These weren't random vitamins. They were the exact brand my app tracked, the one with the distinctive turquoise lid. She hadn't just looked at my cycle data. She'd studied it thoroughly enough to purchase supplements matching my existing regimen. My hands went cold, holding the box. The label even listed my preferred dosage, the dose I'd manually entered into the app months ago. They'd discussed this, planned it, probably had the package shipped to the resort, all based on information stolen from my phone while I slept in the room they'd barged into. Conversations swirled around me about due dates and baby names, relatives debating whether summer or fall births were better. I pressed my palms flat against the tablecloth, feeling the texture of the linen against my skin to anchor myself. That's when my mother-in-law dropped the final bomb. I've already reserved the family wing at the hospital back home. The delivery suites have jacuzzis. Something inside me snapped. The chair legs scraped loudly against the floor as I stood up too fast, sending it toppling backward. Crystal glasses trembled as my water tipped over, darkening the white tablecloth. Every conversation at the table died mid-sentence. My husband grabbed my wrist. "Don't," he whispered urgently, but the look in his eyes wasn't concern. It was embarrassment. Embarrassment that I might disrupt their perfect fantasy where my body was community property and boundaries didn't exist. The room's air conditioning suddenly felt insufficient. Sweat prickled along my hairline as I stared at their expectant faces. All these people who thought they had voting rights on my uterus. My mother-in-law's smile had frozen into something tight and fearful, like she finally realized she'd gone too far but didn't know how to take it back. I opened my mouth, unsure what would come out. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to cry, but what actually emerged surprised even me. My voice came out steady and clear, carrying across the silent dining room. "I track my period for health reasons, not your entertainment." The words hung in the air like something solid. My sister-in-law's eyes widened. My father-in-law's fork clattered onto his plate. For the first time since we'd arrived, no one had a script for how to respond. I reached into my purse and pulled out the master key card I'd confiscated from my mother-in-law's beach bag that afternoon. "Next person who enters my room without permission gets reported to hotel security," I said, placing it carefully beside her wine glass. The plastic clicked against the crystal, louder than it should have in the quiet room. When my mother-in-law started crying, those perfect practice tears, I didn't comfort her, just looked her straight in the eyes and said what I should have said years ago. "Those tears worked on your son, not on me." I turned to leave before they could regroup. The carpet muffled my footsteps as I walked past stunned waiters and curious diners. My husband caught up near the elevators, his breath hot on my neck. "You're making a scene," he hissed, gripping my elbow too tight. I shook him off hard enough that he stepped back. "The scene was your mom announcing my uterus is scheduled to the whole family." The elevator doors opened mercifully empty. As they closed between us, I caught his shocked expression, like he'd never actually seen me before. For the first time since this vacation began, my hands didn't shake. The adrenaline left me clear-headed as the numbers lit up one by one. I leaned against the mirrored wall, studying my reflection. Mascara intact, shoulders squared, no trace of the nervous wreck they'd tried to paint me as. The walk to my room felt longer than usual. Every hallway sound made me tense, expecting someone to come running after me, but no one did. Just the occasional burst of laughter from behind closed doors. Other families having normal vacations without reproductive ambushes. Inside my safe space, I locked the deadbolt and put the security latch in place. The prenatal vitamins sat abandoned on the dinner table, but their presence lingered like a ghost in the room. I poured myself a glass of water from the bathroom tap and drank it slowly, watching the city lights through my window. My phone buzzed incessantly in my pocket. I silenced it without looking, knowing what the messages would say. Some variation of, "You hurt your mother-in-law's feelings," or, "Why can't you just be normal?" The screen finally went dark as I placed it face down on the nightstand. Outside, the ocean was just visible beyond the resort lights, dark and endless. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass and breathed deeply. However this ended, one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same between us again. And maybe, I realized with a pang of something like relief, that was exactly what needed to happen. The dinner table went completely silent when I spoke. The clinking of silverware stopped. Even the waiters paused at nearby tables. "I track my period for health reasons, not your entertainment," I said, keeping my voice even. A muscle twitched in my mother-in-law's jaw. I placed both palms flat on the tablecloth to steady myself. "Our baby plans are ours alone." The words hung in the air, sharp and clear. My father-in-law's face turned that particular shade of red he gets during political arguments. The cousins exchanged glances like they weren't sure whether to look at me or their plates. From my purse, I pulled out the master key card I'd taken earlier when my mother-in-law left her beach bag unattended. The plastic made a definitive click when I set it beside her wine glass. "Next person who enters my room uninvited gets reported to hotel security." I watched her eyes dart to the card, then to my husband, waiting for him to intervene. Later, when the clock passed midnight, I finally checked my phone. 27 missed calls, 34 text messages. My lock screen showed previews ranging from concerned to furious. I swiped them all away without reading. The last notification was from my sister-in-law, a single heart emoji. Then another message came through as I watched, a video attachment. The thumbnail showed my mother-in-law's hands going through my suitcase. I didn't open it, just set the phone back down and turned out the light. As I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized this wasn't about the vitamins or even the key card anymore. It was about proving I wouldn't play my assigned role in their family drama, that I could stand up and walk away from the script they'd written for me. The sheets were crisp and cool against my skin. Someone had turned down my bed while I was at dinner. Not the staff, but probably a well-meaning aunt sent to check on me. I wondered how many key cards they'd made between them. How many people had access to my space? A soft knock came at the door just as I was drifting off. My husband's voice muffled through the wood. "Are you okay in there?" Not angry anymore, just tired. I stayed silent, watching the shadows shift across the ceiling. After a minute, I heard his footsteps walking away down the hall. The real test wouldn't come until morning, when we'd all have to face each other again. When the fallout from tonight would settle over breakfast like volcanic ash. But for now, in this quiet room with the ocean humming beyond the balcony, I let myself breathe. The hardest part was over. I turned onto my side and watched the digital clock change from 1:58 to 1:59. Somewhere in another tower hour, my husband was probably lying awake too. Or maybe he'd gone back to his parents' suite to discuss my behavior. It didn't matter anymore. The line had been drawn. When I finally slept, I dreamed about doors. Hundreds of identical hotel doors in a long hallway, some locked, some slightly ajar, some with shadows moving behind the peepholes. I walked down the endless corridor trying to remember which one was mine, but none of the room numbers matched my keycard. I woke with a start at sunrise, the dream still clinging to me. The first birds were starting to chirp outside. The resort would begin stirring soon, kitchen staff prepping breakfast buffets, groundskeepers clearing beach debris from the night. Another day in paradise. The sheets tangled around my legs as I sat up. My phone showed only 2 new notifications, both from the airline app, reminding me of our return flight in 3 days. 3 days to endure whatever came next. 3 days to see if they'd respect the boundaries or test them. I pressed my palms together, fingers interlacing perfectly. No tremor, no hesitation, just steady hands ready for whatever came next. The real battle would begin as soon as I stepped out that door. But for the first time since we'd arrived, I knew exactly what I was fighting for. The hotel room felt different after dinner, not just empty, but waiting. I ordered room service and drew a bath so hot my skin turned pink within minutes. The water smelled faintly of chlorine from the resort system, but I didn't care. For the first time in days, no one could walk in unannounced. My phone buzzed on the counter, the screen lighting up with notifications every few seconds. I toweled off and scrolled through them. Selfish. After all we've done for you. Ungrateful. The messages blurred together until one stood out. An itemized list from my father-in-law titled Family Vacations 2015 to Present. Every trip we'd ever taken together was there, with dollar amounts next to each. Airfare, meals, activities. The final line read, total investment in your marriage, $28,736.50. I set the phone down carefully. The resort robe I'd wrapped myself in suddenly felt too thin. Outside, laughter floated up from the pool area where a late-night swim party was winding down. I thought about calling my mom, but it was 2 a.m. back home. Instead, I refilled my water glass and sat on the balcony, watching security guards patrol the beach with flashlights. Midnight came and went. No knock on my door, no texts from my husband. I knew where he was, 2 towers over, in that suite with the adjoining door, probably getting lectured about his difficult wife. The minibar key sat untouched on the desk. I wasn't about to give them ammunition by charging alcohol to the room. At 12:37 a.m., my screen lit up again. This time it was my sister-in-law. "You were magnificent," her message read. Below it were screenshots of their private family chat. The first showed my mother-in-law telling everyone I had main character syndrome. Another had my aunt speculating that my hormones were out of balance. But the worst was from my father-in-law. "She's using our son for his money and now she's showing her true colors." I nearly laughed out loud. We'd paid for this trip ourselves, every penny. Our shared account showed the resort charge, the flight confirmations, the rental car receipt, and yet here they were, rewriting history because the narrative suited them better. I scrolled through the rest of the screenshots. The cousins had mostly stayed quiet, except for one who suggested I needed medical help. My sister-in-law had circled that message and added her own comment in the screenshot. "They've been saying this crap about me for years." It was the first time anyone in that family had ever hinted they saw what I saw. The bathwater had gone cold in the tub. I pulled the drain plug and listened to it gurgle away. My suitcase sat untouched where I'd left it. No one had rifled through it yet tonight, though I had no doubt they would. I took a photo of everything exactly as I'd packed it, time-stamped, just in case. Outside, the moon was bright enough to cast shadows on the balcony. I opened the airline app and checked flight changes. There was 1 seat left on the 6 a.m. to JFK. My finger hovered over the upgrade button. The bed looked suddenly too big, the silence too heavy. Then my phone buzzed once more. Another message from my sister-in-law. "Don't leave," it said. "Stay and watch them squirm." A voice memo followed. I played it on low volume. My mother-in-law whispering furiously to someone in the background, "She can't keep getting away with this." The timestamp showed it had been recorded just 5 minutes ago. I put the phone down and turned off the lights. The sheets were stiff with starch, smelling faintly of bleach. I lay there listening to the AC cycle on and off, trying to guess which of my actions had upset them most. Was it moving rooms, calling out the keycard incident, or simply refusing to cry when they expected me to? At some point, I must have fallen asleep. I woke to insistent knocking at 7 a.m. Not the tentative kind from last night, but official raps that meant business. Through the peephole, I saw a resort staffer holding a tray. "Complimentary breakfast from your family," he announced when I cracked the door. The silver dome-covered pancakes arranged in a smiley face, syrup forming the mouth. A sticky note rested beside it. "We love you. Join us at the cabana at 9. The handwriting was my mother-in-law's perfect cursive. I thanked the staffer and closed the door before he could see my expression. The pancakes went straight in the trash. I drank black coffee from the in-room maker instead, watching the sunrise through the sliding glass door. They'd already shifted tactics overnight, from attacks to love bombing. I knew the drill. Breakdown, then love. Anger, then gifts. It was their cycle, as predictable as the one I tracked on my app. My phone showed no new messages from my husband. Whatever conversation had happened in that suite last night, he clearly hadn't won any arguments. I dressed slowly, choosing an outfit I knew they'd hate. Dark jeans instead of resort wear. My own college sweatshirt instead of the expensive cover cover-ups his mother had bought me. The knock came again at 8:45, this time from the concierge. "Your family has requested your presence at the Seaside Terrace," he said apologetically, holding out a printed invitation like this was some kind of intervention-themed brunch. I took it without comment and closed the door. The invitation was ornate, with gold foil lettering that must have taken the resort staff hours to prepare. "Family Reconciliation Gathering," it read. Below that, in smaller print, "Let's heal together." The Seaside Terrace was set up like a courtroom. Chairs arranged in a perfect circle, bottled water placed at each seat, my in-laws sitting stiffly across from the empty chair, clearly meant for me. My mother-in-law wore her church pearls and that smile that never reaches her eyes. "We're so glad you came," she said, as if I'd had a choice. She started with the classic non-apology. "If you took anything the wrong way this week," her voice trailed off meaningfully, waiting for me to fill in the rest. Her hands were folded neatly on the table, the same way they'd been folded when she announced my ovulation schedule to 20 relatives. "I didn't take anything the wrong way," I said. "You did things that were objectively wrong." The cousins shifted in their seats. One of them cleared his throat and said what they were all thinking. "Can't we just compromise for family harmony?" My father-in-law leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "You're too sensitive about privacy these days," he said, like this was some modern character flaw rather than a basic human right. "In our family, we share everything." He said it proudly, as if his lack of boundaries was some kind of achievement. My husband sat beside me, his knee bouncing under the table. He hadn't looked at me once since I arrived. When the conversation lulled, he finally spoke. Not to defend me, but to pressure me. "Just say sorry so we can move on," he whispered. His breath smelled like the resort toothpaste, minty and false. That's when the door slammed open. My sister-in-law strode in, holding her phone aloft like evidence. "I recorded Mom going through your suitcase yesterday," she announced. The room froze. Even the resort staff arranging pastries at the back table stopped to watch. The video played in perfect silence. There was my mother-in-law sitting on my neatly made bed, rifling through my toiletry bag. The camera zoomed in as she pulled out my birth control pills, examining the pack with obvious disgust before tossing it back in. "That explains a lot," she muttered off camera. The date stamp in the corner showed this happened an hour after I'd left for my private room. 14 shocked faces turned toward my mother-in-law. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. Then came the excuses. "I was just tidying up. You know how messy she packs. Someone had to check if she was taking care of herself." Each justification made it worse. I stood up slowly. The chair legs scraped against the tile floor. Suddenly, they were all watching me. My husband confused, his parents furious, the cousins fascinated. "Here's the compromise," I said, measuring each word. "We'll attend family therapy back home, or we won't attend anything. Ever again." The room erupted. My mother-in-law started crying. My father-in-law slammed his water bottle down hard enough that the cap popped off. My husband just stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Only my sister-in-law remained calm, nodding slightly as she pocketed her phone. "Those are the options," I continued over the noise. "Therapy or nothing." I didn't raise my voice, didn't cry, didn't give them anything to use against me later. I just stood there in my jeans and sweatshirt, so underdressed compared to their resort chic outfits, feeling stronger than I had all week. My mother-in-law dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "We were only trying to help," she sniffed. The same line they always used, as if crossing every possible boundary was charitable rather than controlling. One of the aunts tried to mediate. "Surely we can work this out without strangers involved." She said therapy like it was a dirty word. My sister-in-law snorted audibly. I picked up my bag. "Think about it," I said. "Not a request, just a statement." Then I walked out, past the curious hotel guests, past the staff pretending not to eavesdrop, back to the quiet of my borrowed room. The flight home was the longest 3 hours of my marriage. We sat in tense silence, the armrest between us like a border wall. My husband stared out the window the whole time, jaw clenched. I could see his reflection in the plexiglass, the same hurt confusion he'd worn since breakfast. Halfway through the flight, he finally spoke. Was the ultimatum really necessary? I didn't answer right away, just watched the clouds roll past, white and shapeless. "Yes," I said eventually, "unless you wanted me to leave for good." Update, we had our first therapy appointment. His parents didn't come, of course. They'd chosen the nothing option, at least for now. The therapist's office smelled like lavender and old books. My husband sat stiffly on the couch, his fist clenched in his lap. The therapist asked him why he thought we were there. He said, "Because my wife can't get along with my parents." I didn't correct him, just let the silence stretch until he finally looked up at me, really looked at me, for the first time since that disastrous dinner. His expression changed then, like something was dawning on him. Maybe he was finally starting to see what I'd seen all along. They canceled Christmas 3 days after that session. My mother-in-law sent a blistering email about ungrateful children. My father-in-law blocked my number, but the invites still come. Birthdays, barbecues, Sunday dinners, always with the same unspoken condition. Show up and pretend nothing happened. We haven't gone back, not once. During our third session, she leaned forward in her chair and asked my husband, "Who packed your lunches growing up?" He didn't hesitate. "Mom did. She still texts me what to eat each day." His phone buzzed as if on cue. We all saw the notification flash. "Remember salmon for omega-3s." The therapist nodded slowly, then asked, "And who manages your wife's nutrition now?" I watched his face change. His eyebrows furrowed like he was doing math in his head. Then it clicked. His mother had been texting him meal suggestions for For me, for years. Chicken for protein, spinach for iron, always with little notes about fertility benefits. He'd been forwarding them to me without realizing, thinking they were general health tips. The therapist let the silence sit between us, heavy with implication. By week 6, we'd graduated from lunchboxes to bigger things. The therapist walked him through reproductive coercion, the way his parents had accessed my health data, announced private plans, even purchased supplements based on stolen information. But they just want grandkids, he said weakly. The therapist didn't argue. She just handed him a printout from the WHO website defining reproductive coercion as a form of abuse. He read it twice, then folded it neatly and put it in his pocket. Week 8 was the breakthrough. He sent his parents a Psychology Today article about boundaries and reproductive autonomy. No commentary, just the link. His mother responded with 7 missed calls. His father replied with a single line, "We won't be disrespected this way." They canceled our Christmas visit that evening, citing a scheduling conflict. We both knew what it really meant. That December was quieter than any before. No forced matching pajamas, no contentious gift exchanges, no passive-aggressive comments about my childbearing timeline. We decorated a small tree with ornaments we'd bought together, ordered Chinese food on Christmas Eve, and slept until 10. The peace unsettled him at first. "Shouldn't we call them?" he asked around midday. I let him sit with that question until he answered it himself. New Year's Day brought his sister's confession via text. Turns out his mother had been logging into his childhood email account until last year, monitoring messages, screening contacts, even occasionally replying as him. We changed every password that afternoon. He took the key his parents had kept to our apartment off his keyring, the metal clinking sharply in the trash can. The real test came in February when his mother's birthday rolled around. I expected him to cave, to call with strained pleasantries or send flowers from both of us. Instead, he mailed a card with careful, neutral wording. "Hope you have a nice day." No apology, no invitation back into our lives. Just 4 words that somehow carried more weight than any argument we'd had. Winter thawed into spring, and with it came his slow disentanglement. He stopped forwarding his mother's nutrition texts. He deleted the shared family calendar they'd used to track our movements. When his father texted demanding weekly phone check-ins, he replied, "We'll call when we have time." I watched him find his footing in these small rebellions, each one chipping away at decades of conditioning. Our therapist called it detachment with love, maintaining care without surrendering autonomy. It looked less dramatic than I'd imagined. No fiery confrontations, just quiet decisions, no grand declarations, just gradual changes executed over months of therapy sessions and increasingly uncomfortable family group chats. His parents' retaliation was predictable. They sent him childhood photos with captions like, "Remember when you loved your family?" Left tearful voicemails about ungrateful children. Had relatives casually stop by our neighborhood hoping to bump into him. Each attempt backfired, only proving the therapist's points about manipulation. In March, his sister sent proof their mother had been accessing his credit report. "She says she's just helping monitor your finances," she texted along with a screenshot of their mom's password-protected spreadsheet tracking his purchases. That night, he placed his first fraud alert with the credit bureaus, a bureaucratic middle finger to years of surveillance. Easter came and went without the usual guilt about skipping service with his family. Instead, we slept late and made waffles. The syrup bottle left a sticky ring on the table that we didn't wipe up immediately. Such a small thing, but it felt rebellious. Proof we could live by our own messes now, not theirs. By May, he'd stopped jumping when his phone buzzed with their messages. Sometimes he replied hours later with benign pleasantries. Other times, not at all. The anxiety in his shoulders eased just slightly, though he still checked the locks twice before bed. Old habits die hard. The biggest change wasn't in how he dealt with them, but in how he saw me. Little things, like praising me for standing up to his parents instead of begging me to keep quiet. Like finally understanding why I'd been so shaken when they went through my phone. Like hearing his mother criticize my job and saying, "Actually, her promotion has great benefits," without being prompted. When vacation season approached again, he surprised me by asking where we wanted to go. No mention of the family beach house, no hidden agendas about who might drop by. Just us, making plans like 2 adults who got to decide their own lives. We chose a rental 4 states away from his parents' usual summer spot. The listing advertised no Wi-Fi, weak cell service, and no nearby neighbors. He booked it without hesitation. That night, I saw him researching local restaurants. Not for fertility-friendly menus this time, just places with good seafood and ocean views. Small victories. His mother still texts weekly about vitamins and ovulation cycles. He still mostly ignores them. But last Tuesday, she crossed a line, asking detailed questions about my period timing, just in case. I watched him type the response himself for the first time. "Mom, this is inappropriate." Then the follow-up I didn't expect. "If you bring it up again, we won't be answering." The therapist smiled when we told her. She called it progress. I called it the first time in 5 years I'd felt like his wife instead of his parents' daughter-in-law. Neither of us mentioned how long the road ahead still was. Summer looms now, with all its old triggers and new possibilities. There are still flashpoints: Father's Day, his parents' anniversary, the inevitable family emergency they'll manufacture for attention. But for the first time, we're entering vacation season aligned. Last night, I heard him on the phone with his sister. "No, we're not going to the shore house this year," he said firmly, then paused. "Because we don't want to." Simple as that. No long excuses, no carefully worded deflections. Just the truth, stated plainly. I stood in the hallway listening to this new version of him, the one who could say no without collapsing into guilt, the one slowly learning he didn't owe them every piece of our lives, the one finally recognizing that love shouldn't come with strings attached to my ovulation calendar. The invitations for their summer gatherings still come, of course. Gold embossed cards rehearsing the same fantasy where we all play happy family again. We don't RSVP anymore. Just let them sit on the counter until recycling day. Another small act of defiance in this quiet revolution of boundaries. I stared at the draft email for 20 minutes before sending it. My cursor hovered over the button while my husband stood behind me, reading over my shoulder. The subject line said what we'd both been thinking for months. July beach house, new rules apply. The bullet points were simple but non-negotiable. No unannounced visits, no commentary on our family planning, no access to our devices. My stomach tightened as I reread them. Part of me still worried this was too harsh, even after everything. Then my husband leaned forward and added a final line himself. Violators will be asked to leave immediately. His voice didn't waver when he said it. We sent it to his entire family at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, a random evening chosen specifically because it wasn't a holiday or special occasion. No build-up, no warning, just clear boundaries delivered like any other household announcement. His parents replied within 13 minutes. The email was brief. We won't be attending under these conditions. No questions, no negotiations, just instant rejection of terms they'd never had to follow before. His sister responded differently. Her RSVP came through with 3 exclamation points and finally in all caps. We booked a 2-bedroom beach house instead of our usual shared rental. One room for us, another for whichever family members could respect our rules. His sister claimed the guest room immediately, joking that she'd bring earplugs in case his parents forgot the new policy and showed up anyway. The planning process felt different this time. We chose restaurants based on menus we actually liked, not places his parents approved of. We blocked off afternoons as unavailable on the shared calendar for no reason other than wanting alone time. Small rebellions that would have caused meltdowns a year ago now went unchallenged. 2 weeks before the trip, his mother sent a lengthy email about proper vacation packing, complete with a numbered list and links to specific brands she preferred. We didn't reply. Then came the daily texts, reminders about sunscreen application, warnings about undertows, tips for avoiding food poisoning, each one ignored. The morning we left, my phone buzzed with one final message. Remember to take your vitamins. I showed it to my husband without comment. He took my phone and typed the reply himself. We remember how to mute notifications too. Then he handed it back and started the car like nothing had happened. The beach house was smaller than his family's usual rentals, with uneven floors and a fridge that hummed too loudly. But the front door locked securely, and there were no adjoining rooms. His sister arrived bearing wine and a joking apology for any genetic guilt she might carry from their parents. Dinner that first night was takeout eaten straight from the containers. No fancy table settings, no forced conversation topics, no disapproving looks about what we chose to eat. His sister told stories about their childhood we'd never heard before, moments where his parents' controlling behavior had affected her too, but no one had noticed because she wasn't the golden child. On day 3, my husband's phone rang with his parents' special ringtone, the one he'd forgotten to change. We both froze mid-conversation, watching it vibrate across the coffee table. After 10 seconds, he reached over and hit decline. Then he changed the ringtone to match everyone else's. They called twice more that week. Both times went to voicemail. The messages left were variations of the same theme. They'd heard we were having car trouble. We weren't. Worried we'd gotten food poisoning. We hadn't. Wanted to confirm the house hadn't been burglarized. It was fine. Each call, thinly veiled surveillance masquerading as concern. By the 5th day, we'd settled into a comfortable routine. Mornings were quiet coffee on the porch. Afternoons were spent reading or swimming without scheduled activities. One night, we drank too much wine and laughed about how his mother would have panicked seeing us leave dishes in the sink overnight. Small freedoms that shouldn't have felt radical, but did. His sister left midweek for a work commitment. The house felt bigger without her, but not emptier. We spread our things across both rooms just because we could. Left towels on the floor, slept late without alarms, all normal things made meaningful by years of having them monitored. The last morning, we woke to find his parents had finally taken the bait. They'd sent a long email detailing all the meals we'd missed at their favorite restaurants, all the events we'd skipped, all the ways this vacation fell short of family tradition. His fingers hovered over the keyboard before he settled on a 5-word reply. We had exactly what we needed. Packing up, I found a single prenatal vitamin stuck to the bottom of my toiletry bag, probably planted there weeks earlier. I held it up for my husband to see. He plucked it from my fingers and flushed it without a word. The drive home was quiet but not tense. At a gas station halfway back, his phone buzzed with another parental check-in. He read it while pumping gas, then slipped the phone back in his pocket without responding. "You don't have to ignore them completely," I said. "I know," he answered, "but I want to." We loaded back into the car with snacks and drinks we'd chosen ourselves. No pre-approved brand restrictions, no calorie calculations, just chips and soda because we felt like it. At home, we unpacked slowly, letting laundry pile up in ways that would have horrified his mother. Our messy bedroom, our crowded fridge, our unplanned schedule, all now sources of quiet pride rather than shame. A week later, the inevitable happened. His parents announced they were coming to visit. "Just for lunch," the email promised. My husband replied this time, copying me on the response, "We're not available that day." No excuses, no explanations, just a boundary held. His mother wrote back immediately demanding to know why. He didn't reply. Instead, he forwarded the thread to our therapist and made reservations at our favorite restaurant for the exact date and time his parents had demanded. When the day arrived, we ate leisurely, lingering over dessert just because we could. His phone stayed face down on the table the entire time, silent except for one brief vibration midway through lunch. He glanced at it, then at me. "Mom wants to know if we're sick," he said, showing me the message. They showed up anyway. We ordered coffee and stayed another hour. The changes came slowly at first, then all at once. My husband, who used to stay silent when his parents grilled me about my career choices, now interrupts them mid-sentence. "We're not discussing her job today," he said last Sunday when his mother started in about my overly ambitious promotion. The look on her face, like she'd been slapped with a rubber glove, almost made me laugh.